here we stand. We have come to each other's wilderness. In this time of absent solace and wounded rain. Giallo time without having done the crime.
Considered a strange and mysterious place by the Europeans. Many called it the Dark Continent, but to Africans and enlightened Europeans who came to know it, Africa was a land kissed by the gods, and the Europeans wanted it. Africa, home of the Nile, the world's longest river, the Sahara, the world's largest desert, and Mount Kilimanjaro, one of the world's highest mountains. Africa, home to diamonds, gold, rubber, uranium, minerals, lush forests, magnificent animals, people, skilled, versatile, strong. Africa, home of ancient Kemet and Timbuktu, cradle of civilization, commerce, medicine, philosophy, astronomy, science, mathematics, and knowledge. Africa, the birthplace of all life and God worship, and the Europeans wanted it. My people, repeat after me these names of African tribes. Bambara,
Bambara,
Midday,
Midday,
Iwe,
Iwe,
Akan.
Akan.
You can imagine the horrors and the atrocities that awaited our people aboard those slave vessels. The filth and stench, the disease and loss of life. Men, women, and children packed in spaces so tight they could not turn, stand, sit, or squat. Such were the conditions that our people lived through during the hellish journey from Africa to the New World. The journey known as the Middle Passage, the Great Tragedy, the Triangular Slave Trade, disaster, or Ma'afa. For more than 50 days, my people were forced to live like trapped animals, caged in spaces tighter than coffins, crammed in suffocating heat, held fast by chains bolted to the decks, forced to lie in their own waste and the waste of others, breathing air rancid with disease, putrid vomit, and other body fluids, and sickness. Oh, the horror was unimaginable, inexpressible, ineffable. We were jungle people, mighty people, deeply rooted in land, seed strong, feet connected to soil, determined people. We let our music soar. Dancers danced, the circle unbroken. Writers sang while griots gave Sankofa predictions, from desert to shore. Memory was clear, and our smiles were sincere. We planted the seed of civilization, creativity, arts, and science. We sang beauty first and danced to our Most High. And through the knowledge of the first eye, could travel through time and fly. We did haiku and hieroglyphics. God's song defined our actions, and Ra made up the lyrics. From ballet, classical, modern, and tap, to jazz, bebop, hip-hop, and rap. Heirs to roots of all music and dance, entranced and embraced as a race we enhanced. Our ancestors at the bottom of the Atlantic greet us with Yemanya and Oshun waves. Remind us of your trials and your trails, left across the deepest paths, and paving our waters, informing our spirit through magnetic, fluid. Guide and protect our cultures, hoping we will also be true to it. And the woman, the black woman, the African boom, man. If it's set in its full glory, you are the us that we hope to be. Mothers planning bright futures for their children against American screen nightmares. Wives keeping their dreams alive by injecting them with inspiration to their families. Lovers unafraid of turning tears of anguish into laughter. Queen mothers, bright, offering calm breath, allowing us a glance at our center. You are praised by some and imitated by all. You have caused the rise of great men and led great kingdoms to fall, carrying wisdom, carrying our future when the world seems impossible. You are always a tree, displaying roots and beauty. Our ancestors are missed, not found in the carnal, but remembered in study cells. Early morning ciphers and open mics, where profound simplicity opens our hearts to ourselves. Remembered as originators of philosophy and math, even the plumbing for our baths, of surgery and astronomy as ambassadors we bring harmony. The basis for all religion and spiritual practices, from a vision that was sound, steadfast, and tempered. Now, here we stand. We have come to each other in wilderness, in this time of absent solace and wounded rain. Giallo time without having done the crime. Where we're jailed because our metanetta is called graffiti. Brothers hip-hop in locked up cellars producing. Brothers born bright and bred to be beautiful. To whom? As determined fruit, we must realize that the ships who take direction from our actions, lamenting that we've lost, celebrating that which was saved, still, there's work to be done, visions to be fulfilled. Do not forget, give praise to bright morning, distilled water for purity, laughter, warmth, compassion, and caring. Oh yes, caring. Witness the blessings you receive when you are genuinely sharing. Your search will be rewarded. Race to the sun as your center. Continue to support Black artists and innovative Black writers. Try to inspire new students each and every day. Our brilliance has risen through 1,000 horizons. Meet the sun with a smile. Thoughts are concentrated forms of our own energy and power. Seek freedom in yourself to be born again whole. Many have taken our experience using it for their own glory, but now comes a time for us to start telling our own story. Now is the time. Now is the time. Now is the time. The inner mind's eye. Our longing for freedom, they called it drapetomania, a disease of the mind that caused Africans to run. Slaveholders found it difficult to imagine why our ancestors fled, sure that our desire for freedom was linked to a mental imbalance. In the eyes of many masters, my people enjoyed the ideal life. Free food, lodging, medical care, clothing, and someone to look after what the slave owners perceived their needs from the cradle to the grave. The slaveholders took the news of a runaway as a personal affront. In truth, those enslaved were neither happy nor content. We didn't want anything free. What we wanted was freedom. To run was not an easy decision. It meant leaving family and friends. It meant living in caves, holes, or the woods, hiding by day, traveling by night, hunted and haunted. If caught, my people knew it meant the most severe, excruciatingly, scarring, torturous, and brutal punishment. infested rice fields and sweltering cotton fields. The free labor of the enslaved Africans allowed the masters to build America. Our ancestors worked in those fields, picking up to 150 pounds of cotton a day. We did the work that the slaveholder felt beneath him. Work too strenuous for the white race. Work the slaveholder believed that strong African backs were designed to do. Someone had to hold the cotton. Someone had to plant the corn. Someone had to work while the white folks played. That's why donkeys were born. Proclamation was an executive order issued by President Abraham Lincoln during the American Civil War. It proclaimed the freedom of 3.1 million of the nation's 4 million slaves and immediately freed 50,000 of them, with the rest freed as the Union armies advanced. On September 22nd, 1862, Lincoln announced the formal emancipation of all slaves in any Confederate state that did not return to Union control by January 1st, 1863. President Lincoln issued an executive order in his capacity as the Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy under Article 2, Section 2 of the United States Constitution.
And what would bring my people was not yet known, but they knew slavery's chains had been broken. From the cotton plantations of the Deep South to the rice fields of the coastal states, there rose a freedom song. No more driver's lash for me. No more, no more. No more driver's lash for me. Many thousands gone.
Remembering lest we forget the journey. Remembering to know ourselves, our legacy, power, our love, and truth. To remember is to recollect things from the past in order to really understand our present. Comprehend and strategize for the future. No more than what we see. No more than what we read. Remembering.
Okay. As I said, I thought that it would be important for you all to see what I saw that day when I went into school. It was probably totally different from what you all see today when you come to school. And I'll try and explain why. Back in 1960, schools were separate, meaning black kids and white kids had to attend school separately. It was the law. And there was an organization who felt like this law really didn't make any sense, that kids should be allowed to attend any school of their choice, and they should be allowed to do that together. That organization was the NAACP. And so when I was 6 years old, well, actually, let me go back. I was 5 years old. I was going to an all-black school. I was in kindergarten. Oh, do we have any kindergartens in here? Yes. Okay. So I was your age, and I was going to an all-black school. There were no white kids in my school. And I loved school. I knew what school was like. We had recess. We could go to the cafeteria. We played games. I had lots of friends, and I had a great time at school. But then one day my mom said to me, "Ruby, you're going to go to a new school." And I was a little bit nervous about that. Have any of you all in here ever had to change schools? Yes. Okay. And usually you're a little bit nervous about that. Is that right? And why is that? Why are you nervous about changing schools? Yes. Can you stand up and tell me? Why are you nervous?
How the people would act around you. Just different.
Okay. She said she was probably nervous because she didn't know what the school was going to be like, and nervous about the people that were at the new school. Is that it? Well, usually most kids are nervous because they believe that they are going to leave their friends and they're not sure if they're going to make new friends. Is that right? Yes. So that's what I was nervous about. I wasn't sure if I was going to make new friends. But in any case, back then when the schools were separate, this organization said, you know what, we need to change this. And so what they did is they needed to have 6-year-old kids be the first children to go into an all-white school. And so what I found out is that that organization came into neighborhoods and they knocked on doors and they asked parents if they would be willing to send their child to an all-white school for the very first time in the city. And that city was New Orleans. And there were about 100 families who said, yes, I'll do that. I will send my 6-year-old to this all-white school. And so back then there were a lot of people who felt like, well, you know what, we don't want things to change. We would like for the schools to stay exactly the way they are. And so that meant there were people who felt like this should change, kids should be together just the way you guys are together today. But there were also a group of people who felt like, no, we don't think we want this to happen. So that meant that the NAACP had to get a court order, because one of the people who were against this changing was the governor. There were lots of people, and people in very, very high places. But the governor of Louisiana said, you know what, I would like for my schools to remain the same. And if we change them, if we try to change them, I will close the schools here in New Orleans. So that meant that this organization had to go to the president and say, we need a court order because we want this to change. And the governor may try to stop it. And so the president agreed. And he gave the court order. And they came back to Louisiana. And then they had to take those 100 kids who all agreed to be the first children to integrate the school, and the school board said, we have to test those children first. And so I remember at 6 years old going to the school board office and taking this test. So there I was sitting in a room with about 100 other kids, and we were taking a test. But you know, back then, that group of people who felt like we would like for our schools to remain the same, some of those people were actually on the school board. Because also in 1960, teachers had to teach in separate schools. If you were white, you had to teach in a white school, and if you were black, you had to teach in a black school. So I had never seen a white teacher before. And so the school board also, there were some people on the school board who felt like, let's leave things the way they are. So what they did, and this is what I was told, they set up the test so that these 100 kids would fail it. They made the test very, very hard. And you know what? Also back then, it's a known fact that when African Americans tried to register the vote, the test was always set up so that they could fail it. So they made it very, very hard for African Americans to vote. And so this was the same thing the school board did. They set up this test so that kids would fail it. And out of about 100 kids, only 6 kids passed this test. And I happened to be one. So there were actually going to be 2 schools that were integrated. And they both were in the most racist part of New Orleans. Keep in mind that there were a group of people who did not want this to happen. And so that's why all of this was sort of set up. But then those 6 people, 6 little kids that passed that test, they were divided up. And 3 kids were supposed to go to one school and 3 kids to another. The school that I integrated was called William Frantz Elementary. And that was the school that you just saw on the video. The other school was McDonald 19 in New Orleans. And so 3 girls went to one school, McDonald 19, and the other 3 kids were supposed to go to the school that I went to. But you know what happened? By the time the first day came, the 2 kids that were supposed to go to school with me decided not to go. Their parents said, well, you know what, I don't think we should do this. And so those 2 kids stayed home. So it was too late to go back and retest more kids. So that meant I was left to go alone. So that day that you saw on screen was my first day. And what I remember about that first day is getting dressed, and my mom said, Ruby, there might be a lot of people outside of this new school, but don't be afraid, because I'm going to be with you. And I said, okay. But then there was a knock at the door, and my mom opened the door, and there were 4 very large white men at the door. And they had yellow bands on their arms. And those bands said, U.S. Marshal. And I remember thinking, I wonder what that means. And so they were there to take us to school. So I remember getting into the car with these men, with my mom, and we were on our way to school. And then I heard the conversation that was going on in the car. I was sort of sitting in the back seat, and the federal marshals were sitting next to us, and they started to talk to my mom about how we should get out of the car once we got in front of the school. Do any of you all in here know what federal marshals are? Anybody? Yes. Very good answer. He said a federal marshal are people that keep the president safe. That's close. Because the president sends them to protect people, not just the president, but other people. I know I was at another school and I asked that same question, and a little boy said, they're like men in black. So you're right, that's exactly, they're like special police. And so they were telling my mom, they said, Mrs. Bridges, when we get in front of the school, we would like for you to let the federal marshal in the front get out first, and then we will get out in the back, and we will surround you and your daughter. We want you to walk straight ahead and not look back. And they seemed really nervous. And so when we got in front of the school, I saw huge crowds of people standing in front of the school. And so I thought to myself, I wonder why all of these people are out here. And you know, in New Orleans, we have Mardi Gras. I don't know if any of you all know what Mardi Gras is. Anybody know what Mardi Gras is?
There's a lot of people.
Mardi Gras has a lot of people. That's true. Anybody else know? Yes? Okay, I'll tell you. Mardi Gras is like, yes? You said you catch candy. Mardi Gras is like a huge parade and the whole city takes part. Actually, the city is totally closed down and all of the people go out into the street and they party and have a good time. And there are usually these huge floats that pass and they throw things like little beads and stuff. And so we all go out for Mardi Gras. And so when I drove up in front of my school, I saw the same thing. I saw lots of people and they were waving their hands and shouting. And so I thought to myself, we're in a parade. It must be Mardi Gras. Because you have to keep in mind that no one really told me what was going on. My mom only said, Ruby, you're going to go to a new school. And so when you're 6 years old and nobody really explains anything to you, you try and figure it out yourself. And so I thought, I'm in a parade. It must be Mardi Gras. And so we got out of the car in front of the school, and I stood there and I looked up at my school and I thought, wow, this school sure looks huge. It's a lot bigger than the school that I had gone to before. And you know, even though schools were separate back then, they always said to us, the schools are separate, but the schools are equal. They're all the same. But you know what? That wasn't true. Because when I got out of the car and I looked up at the school, I thought, well, my mom did say that this was school, but it seems different. There are lots of police out here. There's lots of people. I had to be escorted to school by these big men. I must be going to college. This must be college because it was so different from the school that I had gone to before. And so there I was, very happy because my mom was with me and I was going to college. And so we got into the school building, and once we got into the school building, the federal marshals took us straight to the principal's office. And we went to the principal's office and sat behind some glass windows. And I remember the federal marshals standing there, and they never moved. They stood there by the windows, and my mom and I sat in the principal's office. And it seemed like it took forever. It was all day we sat there. But as we sat there waiting for me to go to class, all of these parents started coming, passing the window. And they seemed very, very upset. They were pointing and shouting, and I didn't know what was going on. But I remember seeing them pass the window, and they had their kids with them. And I kept wondering to myself, I wonder what's the matter? Maybe this is the way a school, big school operates. But then later on, I found out, you know, even though everybody in the city knew that the schools were going to be integrated, it was a secret. No one told them what schools were going to be integrated. And so what happened was all of those parents came to their child's school that day, they took their children to class, and then they came back outside and they waited and waited. And then when I drove up, they knew that it was their child's school. And so after I got inside, sitting there in the principal's office, all of those parents rushed into the school, went into class, packed their kids up, and took them home. And so when they passed the window, they were leaving. Now, can you imagine going to school, a new school, for the very first time, and you're nervous, and you go straight to the principal's office, and you sit there, and then all of a sudden, all of the kids leave. And they all leave because a black child has just entered the building. That's why they left, because I was there. And so that whole day, I spent sitting there in the principal's office. The day was over. The federal marshals took us home. And I remember thinking to myself, well, this was easy. I think I like this school. And so we went home. The very next day, it was the same thing. The federal marshals came, they picked us up, drove us to school. But this time, when we got in front of the school, the crowds were much, much larger. And they seemed very, very angry. And my mother was very nervous. She squeezed my hand and she said, Ruby, don't turn around. Just walk straight ahead. And so I did. And we got into the class, we got into the building, and the principal said, your class is down the hall. And so I remember when we got into the building, it was different. It was very, very quiet, because I remember hearing the footsteps as we walked up the stairs and down the hall. And it seemed like nobody was there. So when I got to my classroom, I remember looking into the classroom, and all I saw was these empty desks. And I thought, we're too early. My mom brought me to school too early. But the teacher was standing there, and she asked me to come in and take a seat. And then I remember looking at her and thinking, she's white. Remember, because I had not seen a white teacher before. And I was a little bit nervous about that, because she looked exactly like the crowd outside of the school. So every day when I passed the crowd, she looked exactly like them. But when she asked me to come in and take a seat, she started to teach me. And you know what? After a while, I learned that she was different. She was totally, totally different from the crowd outside of the school. She was so nice. She did everything with me. We did music, we did art, she read stories to me, we played games, and she taught me. And you know what? Her and I became best friends. She was like another mother to me. And so then I started to realize, you know what? She's not like that crowd outside of the school. Even though she's white, and she looks exactly like the crowd outside of the school, she's different. And so at 6 years old, I learned the lesson that Martin Luther King tried to teach all of us. And that is, you should never, never judge a person by the color of their skin. I knew that I could not judge my teacher the same way I could judge the mob outside of the school. And I learned that lesson at 6 years old.
Ruby Bridges, born September 8, 1954, is an African-American civil rights activist. She was the first African-American child to desegregate the all-white William Frantz Elementary School in Louisiana during the New Orleans school desegregation crisis on November 14, 1960. She is the subject of a 1964 painting, The Problem We All Live With, by Norman Rockwell. I am Ruby Bridges.
Ruby Bridges being the face of school integration greatly affected Ruby's family. While many supported Ruby's bravery and sent money to the Bridges family, her father, Avon Bridges, was tried. The family's local grocery store refused to sell groceries to the family. And Ruby's grandparents were evicted from the farm they had worked for over 25 years. I am Ruby Bridges.
Despite the challenges, Ruby persevered. Many neighbors and sympathizers from the North helped Ruby and her family. They sent money, babysat, and helped Ruby's dad find a job. Ruby finished grade school and graduated from Francis T. Nichols High School in New Orleans. She then studied travel and tourism at Kansas City Business School. I am Ruby Bridges.
I am Ruby Bridges. Ruby Bridges' courageous steps led her through her time and into an integrated high school, which was only possible for many others due to her brave years in elementary. I am Ruby Bridges.
Take courage, my soul, and let us journey on, for the night is dark, and I am far from home. Thanks be to God. The morning light appears. The storm is passing over. The storm is passing over. The storm is passing over. Hallelujah.